Welcome to the LC3 Family Talk podcast, where we take a deeper look at everything from recent sermons to current events, all through a biblical lens. You'll love the guests and stories you'll hear on LC3 Family Talk, where our goal is connection, community, and relationship with God and with one another. And now, here's your host and one of our pastors, David Pritchard.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to LC3 Family Talk. This is Pastor David. Glad that you are here as we have another episode. And today, what we're going to do is we are going to talk to a couple of newer faces around here, at least staff-wise. These two, Brendan and Logan, are our youth pastors here. I can't wait for you to get to know them a little bit more. And you guys, thanks for joining me today. What I'd love to do is start a little bit, tell us a little bit about yourself and family, and how you ended up coming to Lake City.
I can kick it off. I'm Logan, middle school pastor here. I grew up actually in Washington, but on the other side of the state, so Yakima area is where I'm from. I grew up in a Christian household. My dad's a youth pastor as well, so kind of following his footsteps a little bit. I went to college in Colorado, shout out CCU, alma mater, and then did a ministry degree there. Met Brendan working in the mailroom, so he's my connection to Lake City. And then when Reese was asking about youth pastors looking for a job, Brendan was like, I got a guy for you. So that's how I got connected here. I've been here for a year and some change, year and a half almost. I love what I do. I have an awesome job.
Yeah, something changed really big this...
Right. Yeah, that's an important thing I should mention.
It is.
I'm married now, and I've been for 3 months today.
Hopefully Olivia won't see this episode.
I know. That would be such a shame.
You'll be in the doghouse.
Shout out my wife, who is loving and forgiving, and that's been great. It's just me and my wife and a dog living it up.
All right.
My name's Brendan Oury. I'm the pastor of high school discipleship here. A little bit about me, my family, how I got here. I'm also married, but I've been married for a little over 2 years now to my lovely wife, Madison, who is...
You're like an old vet. You've been,
Absolutely. I have all the answers. Any of your marriage questions, I definitely am a pro at this point. No, but she's absolutely my better half. My family is incredibly large. I come from a blended family, and not a lot of people, I'd say a good amount of people that are listening to this have a chance of knowing my mom. She's the director of children's ministry here at Lake City. Her name's Nicole Oury. So I grew up going to this church 18 years of my life, which was awesome. Went to kids ministry here, was in youth ministry here, sat under the pastors and the teaching of this church. And then at 18, decided to go to college, went to Colorado to go to Colorado Christian University. Met Logan there, like he said. We worked in the mailroom together, which was always a fun time. Met my wife out there at school as well. Then worked out there for about a year. And then Reese, the old pastor of high school discipleship here and the current pastor of discipleship at Lake City, reached out and said, hey, my role is going to be changing a little bit. Do you want to come back and serve here and work in ministry here? And initially I told him no. And then the Lord, in his ways, changed a lot of things on my side, all the reasons I had for coming or not coming, and ultimately I ended up here, ready to love and serve the congregation of LC3 and work in the ministry.
Well, I'm super glad you're both here. Obviously, Brendan, I've known you for a lot of years and love your folks. Both your mom and dad have been super important in my life and my journey with the Lord. But so glad that you guys are both here, and I've met both your wives. I actually got to hang out with you guys and your wives up at Malibu, serving up there, and that was fun to get a little bit of extra time to get to know them, so that was great. We're going to be talking about ministry and youth ministry a little bit, so I thought let's start with just kind of like, how did you know or when did you know that you wanted to do this or do something like this in ministry?
For me, I went through, like everybody, I think, like a lot of different jobs I wanted to do when I grew up. I always was great at math and loved math, so I wanted to be a math teacher, and then discovered that engineering was a thing, and I was like, I want to be an engineer. But then I was like, I love designing things, so maybe I'll do graphic design. Ended up at photography, so I applied to CCU to major in photography stuff. And then when I was out there for a conference, I really felt the Lord just like moving in my heart. And I was like, okay, if I'm going to be doing photography, which I do enjoy and still do a lot of, I was like, how can I use this to support the kingdom? Because really anything I do has to be for the kingdom. And if it's not for the kingdom, then I'm wasting my time in that career, is what I felt like. And so I was thinking and trying to brainstorm, like, what can I do with photography aside from just being a Christian voice in the photography world? And I was like, well, I can always volunteer at youth group because I grew up volunteering in youth group and serving. I was a student leader. I led the worship team, led some middle school boys small group when I was in high school. I was like, I can keep doing that. I can start Bible studies. And so I think the Lord was really moving in me and pushing me to consider ministry, which was hard because I had to call my dad. And I was like, what if I was a youth pastor but didn't want to, like, what if I did what you do and then not do that ultimately? So I held off telling him for a while. But I was like, no, I feel like the Lord is pushing me to be a youth pastor or do youth ministry or ministry in some
And he said,
way.
don't do it. Don't do it.
No, get out while you can. No, he was super excited. And so I switched my major to youth ministry, added bib studies to get more of that kind of side of education. Loved my time doing those classes at CCU. Interned at a church in Colorado. It was a small church, so I did kind of everything and also youth with them, which was really good to just see how a whole church functions. And then ended up at Lake City. But I really felt growing up, I've seen my dad do it. I got to go to conferences when my brother was in middle school and I was not yet, and then when he was in high school and I was not yet. So I kind of followed my dad around and did all the behind-the-scenes stuff when he was youth pastoring, and so I have a lot of that experience that I didn't really realize until I became youth pastor. I was like, oh, I know how to do this stuff because
I've
I
done
watched
this
my
stuff.
dad. Yeah. So really, really the Lord working in ways I didn't know until I got here. But that's
great.
kind of how I ended up here.
That's great. How about you, Brandon?
Yeah, obviously my story, I grew up in the church. I grew up like my mom working at a church. So that was just a culture that I was steeped in from a very young age. But my own desire and kind of calling to youth ministry happened a little bit later in life. Funnily enough, we actually figured this out about each other more recently. But I also love math. I have a really math-minded brain. And I love students and I love teaching. So I wanted to be a math teacher for a long time. And then when I was about 16 years old, there was just some pretty hard life circumstances that just came up in the life of my family, in our relationships with each other, and just all sorts of different things. And in that moment, I'd grown up in a church culture. I grew up with a relationship with the Lord. I entered that relationship with him when I was about 11 years old, got baptized. But ultimately, it was in that moment where I realized I truly had no control over the world and how it works. And I had no other option than to just enter into deep prayer with the Lord about that situation. And the Lord answered my prayers and then the prayers of my family and really redeemed a hard and broken situation. And after that moment, a lot of reflection with the Lord Lord, you're real. I've seen you work in powerful ways. It's radically changed my understanding of you. Why would it not change what I want to do with my life? And so it went from, I think like Logan said, we can enter many careers and be faithful kingdom citizens, and we can lead people to Christ in those. But for me, with the unique giftings I had, the callings he'd placed upon my life, the passions he'd given me, it was pretty clear that the Lord was saying, enter into vocational ministry where you're going to give 100% of your time and effort into sharing, specifically for me actually with young people who don't know Jesus, who he is and the power of transformation he can have upon their life. So I spent my senior year of high school entering into student leadership, not as an employee of the church, but just as someone who's
You did do
dedicated to
a summer internship with us,
I did
right?
do a summer internship
Yes,
with you guys
I
in my
remember.
senior year. Yeah, led one event by myself, which was probably the worst event I will ever lead in my time in youth ministry ever. So learned a lot from that. But I went to CCU for a biblical studies degree. I'm a proud Greek graduate with a C+ on my final exam. So don't come to me with all your Greek questions, but maybe just a couple of them. I learned some valuable tools in college, both on the educational side, also through doing internships here, one out in Colorado.
It's great. I appreciated how both of you kind of talked about full-time vocational ministry because I used to not like full-time ministry because before I became a pastor or came into full-time vocational ministry, I was in business. And I always felt like I was in ministry. Like if somebody asked me, I'd say, well, I'm in full-time ministry. I earn money doing this other thing. And so I appreciate how you both kind of talked about that because we have obviously a lot of volunteers that put in a lot of time and they're in ministry, right?
Absolutely.
And when they're not here volunteering, they're wherever they work and they're doing ministry. And so I appreciated that. I also heard your dad is a youth pastor, your mom is, in full-time ministry. When you think of people that influence you, obviously those would be two big ones. Who are some other people that come to mind that you say, oh man, this person was instrumental in like getting me to this place where I find myself?
I think obviously my dad is my youth pastor, so I think I can't be like my dad and my youth pastor because they're the same person. But he was huge. I really did enjoy having my dad as my youth pastor. And then I had small group leaders who came and went. But I think really for me, the people who pushed me to grow in my faith and pastorally was when I was attending a church in Colorado. There's like a couple pastors and an intern there who were interns in seminaries. He was older than me. But it was small enough where the pastor knew my pastor from home through Acts 29, but ended up being able to get tacos with him after church, which is just a weird thing. And then the youth pastor there, Kyle, really poured into me when I volunteered in youth ministry there. And then they had a young adult pastor named Joel, who's now moved on to a new church. He was awesome because I was an RA in college, so did a lot of formational stuff in the res life world in college, and wasn't able to attend a lot of the events my church had for young adult guys. And Joel made a huge effort to meet me during the week because I couldn't go to the church to like their young adult events. I think he really showed me how to be super relational in ministry, which I appreciate. And so I keep up with all those guys still.
That's awesome.
And for me, some of those just key figures in my life that really impacted my faith journey, but also like even to leading me to where I am today, which obviously is my faith journey and totally the Lord's providence. But obviously my mom, when I was growing up, I got to live and see her just be a pillar of faith in my life, of a faithful woman of God who is dedicated to her church and to the Lord that she loves and the Lord that loves her. And for me, there's so many times in my life when I'm thinking about hard situations or different things and I'm reflecting on how she reacted, and not the exact same situations, but similar ones. And she is someone who really takes her faith seriously and seeks to be a faithful example to her kids, to the people she works with, to parents, families, the kids she teaches, so many people. And that's just always been incredible for me and such a blessing that I got to grow up in that household. And beyond that, my youth pastors, I had a couple different ones, were always really huge for me. One in particular is a man who's still here is Caleb Heath. He was my youth pastor for a solid 4 years, and he was just really formational because he was my youth pastor in probably of the most tumultuous times of growing up. Obviously, middle and high school are crazy times of life where your life changes a lot, you grow a lot. He was my youth pastor from the age of about 13 to about 16, 17, so some of the most formational years of my life. And he really poured into me and spoke into me and loved me relationally. And then Reese Carlson was kind of the first youth pastor where I had him for my senior year, and he took a chance on giving me and a couple of my other senior friends an opportunity to lead and actually function in a very ministry-minded way of taking ownership, taking leadership of how like a ministry's done, whether it was worship or greeting. And that was really impactful in my growth. And then ultimately going to college, I ended up at a church called Storyline, and the youth pastor there, I started serving under him. He ultimately ended up pouring a lot into me, gave me an internship for a school year out there, gave me opportunities to preach, to teach, to plan events, to lead. All of that was just him recognizing that I was a man that wanted to enter into vocational ministry, that had a passion and fire for the Lord, and he wanted to cultivate those skills. And even as I look back on other youth pastors like Reese and like Caleb, I think that was a thread I see throughout, was they saw something in me that I probably wouldn't have even seen myself.
Yeah, and a couple of things about that. Part of the reason I even asked that question is that we sometimes, not even realizing it, play that role in other people's lives, right? It's fun sometimes to pause and look back and say, wow, who are those people that helped me along the way? The unique thing with you, Brendan, of course, is that I've watched you grow up. You are probably the first, certainly pastorally, you're the first person to come on staff here in that role that grew up here. You know? And so it's fun to think back to little Brendan and loud Brendan and, you know, and then now mature Brendan, just to see how God has grown you over the years, having been able to watch some of that, and now be serving alongside you as a peer, and, you know, that we do life together. What a privilege, really fun. When you think about your second year at staff here now, you've had a year. I'd love to, like, just reflect back on the last year, like, any surprises, maybe a challenge that you had to overcome, or anything along those lines?
I think I've told people this already. I say that like last year was my practice year, and now I'm finally starting my first year as youth pastor because you make so many mistakes, but just a lot of things to learn from of like, oh, that game, students don't like it, or this event was a fail, or that was a huge success. Let's do that again next year. There's a lot of learning in the first year, and then I think the thing that's surprising to me, and probably a lot of people who go to our church, is that I'm a youth pastor full-time, and it doesn't look like playing dodgeball for 40 hours a week. There's a lot more logistical stuff that goes on with staff meetings and helping the larger staff and pastors like plan for sermons and stuff like that, and then helping out where I can and giving feedback and input into how the church operates. My students, a lot of times, they'd be like, what do you do? And I'm like, I do this. Like, I'm a youth pastor. I'm here for 40 hours a week. And they're like, what? And I'm like, yeah, I have the best job in the world. Like, I get to be like in the Word studying, all week when I'm not in meetings or meeting with people, and prep a message to give to students.
What I love about that, having both of you guys on, and certainly this would have been true with Reese as I was working with Reese, is the older some of us staff get, the more removed we are from that generation, right? And so what I love is when we're doing a sermon preview and you guys are sitting in the room, or if we're planning an event like Party at the Park and you guys are in the room, it's so great because, number one, you guys are not in my generation, so just hearing your perspective, but also you guys are connected now very closely with our student ministry. It allows some of us that could easily just be removed from all of that to not plan things without a lens or a view into like what do they need and what would benefit them and serve them. So I love having you guys a part of all of those things. And then hopefully once in a while we'll have a good idea to throw back the other direction, right?
Yeah, I think even in sermons sometimes it's good to be like, oh, this is the language that the next generation is using.
Yes.
Even like for your parents, if you're like, why is my kid saying 6, 7 all the time? It's like, oh, we're so steep in that culture that even though it's so dumb, like we know what that is. And so when Tom, like sometimes he'll use a word and I'm like, oh, that kind of means this now. And he's like, oh, I had no idea.
Yeah.
Just because social media makes things move so fast now that like.
But that's helpful.
Yeah.
It helps us all be better at what we do.
Absolutely.
So now, Brendan, on the other hand, you're back where you grew up. Even Jesus talked about like a prophet is not respected in his hometown. How's that felt for you?
It's been pretty strange in a lot of ways, awesome in a lot of ways too. Even coming back, the LC3's gone through so much growth that there's to some degrees and in some aspects, it's like what I'm coming back to is not what I left. And in the same ways, I'm coming back and I'm going, oh, I've changed and this hasn't. And obviously there's the tensions on both sides. But I think just thinking through even that idea of coming back to the place where you grew up is there was the tension when I initially even interviewed for the job of there's people that the last time they saw me, I was, 15, 16, 17 years old. And we all know that 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20-year-olds, they all do really questionable, that's a kind way to say it, questionable things.
What is it about the frontal lobe, right?
Yeah, not fully developed yet. So they do questionable things. And there's people at this church that I'm sure were even a little bit, not necessarily fully in a negative way, but were surprised, like, oh, that kid that I saw jump into the lake with all of his clothes on and tackle someone in with him. Oh, he's the pastor here now? Are we sure about that? That was a tension for me coming in. And I know when I interviewed for the job, I actually asked a little bit selfishly, like, as we enter these, don't think about don't think that you know me, but like truly interview me like you would interview someone that grew up in New York.
Yeah.
Because I am so different after 4 or 5 years of growth and transformation throughout college. Very formational time for me. One of my tensions, which I think has been relieved in a lot of ways, was are people going to hold me to my worst moments and to who I was before I had time to mature, grow, get married, spend a year doing pastoral ministry before coming back. And ultimately, I am different. I have grown. The Lord has done a work in me. And I'm even reminded of some of the teaching that we've had over the past couple of weeks of God does not hold us to our worst moments. Mm-hmm. And I think just what that tension for me has been very relieved of. The Lord doesn't hold me to my worst moments, so I shouldn't worry about what people think, whether they try to or don't. I'm confident in where the Lord's called me. The staff and pastors and elders prayed faithfully over the choice. Me and my wife prayed faithfully over the decision. And we said, it's going to work because this is where God has us.
Yep. I agree with all of that. And I would also say there is a beautiful aspect of having known you to this whole process. You take Logan, we trusted a little bit in the fact that you knew him and called us and said, hey, this is a good dude. And we're like, great. Like that helps, we start the process. When we hire him, we don't know Logan other than a little bit and an interview with you. Yes, there's messy things from when you were young, but on the other hand, we knew a lot about you. And so there's a comfort, there is a little bit of a comfort in that, of knowing there's not like these hidden things that we have no idea about. And I love what you said, and I would affirm all of that. And I would also say, Brendan, I'm glad that we've known you and that you're that kid now grown up.
Yeah, it's good to be back.
You mentioned you got married this summer, but you're both married. How's that been kind of adjusting for you? How's that balancing or living in that reality of being married and also doing ministry?
Amazing and really hard at the same time. Not because my wife is bad, but because just like marriage is a huge tool that God uses for sanctification. And so there's been a lot of, I think, growth in the past.
Okay, unpack that. You just used a big word,
sanctification.
What do we mean? What are the idea of it, God using it to grow you and make you more Christ-like, more whole? How does that happen in a marriage?
Well, because my wife loves me, she lovingly calls out sin in my life, which I think even like friends will do that. And like Brendan and I had conversations like that in college of like, oh, like this is something I can call out in you or call you to a higher standard. But when somebody lives with you every day, all day, and sees everything you do, they get a whole new look at your life. It's hard to hide anything. And so they get to lovingly call you to a higher standard and call you to be more Christ-like, which is just super awesome. And so marriage is not easy. It's like hard work, but it's work that I love doing. My wife and I dated long distance for a year and a half as well, which is part of our story. And so going from long distance to being in person every day is a jump. Being in the same city for a few months now and being able to go on dates whenever we want and not just one weekend a month when I fly out to see her or she flies out to see me.
Which, by the way, church family, when she flew out to see him, she stayed with us, which was really fun to get to know her a little bit in that context.
Yeah. Which was actually really fun to be able to be like, oh yeah, the Pritchards are like our Washington parents.
Yes.
Or our West Side parents, because I have East Side. But it's been sweet. Lots of growing still to be done, but it's nice to have a partner.
You don't have it all figured out?
Almost.
Okay.
No, I'm kidding.
All right.
Yeah, but also having a partner in ministry is great.
I've been married for a little over 2 years, and it's been nothing but a blessing. And obviously, there's the hard things that come with it, but we work with each other, and then the Lord is gracious to us to help us have forgiveness for each other because He forgave us. But I would say in ministry specifically, having my wife has been nothing but a blessing. When I was in college and thinking about entering, or not thinking about, but beginning and preparing to enter into the vocational ministry world, one of the things that was always reminded of to me by like professors and mentors was pastors oftentimes are some of the most neglected people to receive ministry because we are running ministries, we're pouring out into people, and if we aren't careful and we don't set up the correct relationships, we'll sometimes find ourselves at burnout. And for me, one of the greatest joys and just blessings of being married is my wife. From the time she was in middle school, wanted to be married to a youth pastor. And so she's even entered into mentoring relationships, done reading, and just developed her own relationship to the Lord where she said, if my husband's going to be a pastor, I want to be able to minister to him.
Yeah, what does that look like?
Absolutely. And
awesome.
Not just ministry alongside me. Like, obviously, my wife loves to serve the local church. She's a freshman girls small group leader in the youth group. She serves in the kids ministry. But specifically beyond that, she has really worked on understanding who I am in loving relationship, not just for the purpose of our marriage, but for the purpose of when I am having a heavy week of pastoring, when I'm dealing with a lot of different situations of students with hard family lives or poor decision making or places where I need to step and really mentor and love and disciple and be the light of Christ where there is currently darkness. When that's weighing on me, she steps in with me in those moments and after the fact and goes, what do you need right now? Oftentimes it's easy to find myself in a space of constantly pouring out. She reminds me, one, of the person who truly provides, which is Jesus. She never takes that role fully upon herself, but the Lord has blessed me to have her be someone who she really cares about my soul and ministers to me, which is nothing short of a miracle that the Lord has given that to me.
That's great. You mentioned last year was your practice and now you're ready to go. What are you excited about this year ministry-wise?
I love teaching. That's my favorite part of the job, is just being able to prep a message and talk about Jesus, because I love Jesus. We're spending the entire year this year going through the life of Jesus and kind of helping our students understand who he was as a person. But then also I love games. I love small group stuff. We have a study on Tuesdays now, open invite to any student who wants to come, but really for those who are wanting to go deep, be super challenged in their faith. And I pitched it to them. I was like, I'm going to challenge you. I'm going to ask you to do things that will make you uncomfortable. And so right now we have 6 students who are coming to that, which is great. And so I get a chance to pour into these students more who are wanting to go deeper. And so I'm excited. I love watching students grow and start to take their faith seriously and take leadership and help me run the ministry in some sense. So I'm excited to push those students to go deeper and see that growth.
How about you, Brendan?
We've had about 2 weeks now, but I'm really just excited to get to dive into relationships with all of these different students and with my adult volunteers that are helping, because like that really is where, especially on the youth side, the ministry happens. I agree with Logan. One of my favorite things to do is study the word and ultimately to teach and preach it. But I also understand that a 15-year-old's only going to hear so much from a sermon, but from you getting tacos with them and asking them about their life, and then ultimately giving them wisdom in Scripture in conversation is ultimately going to be received way better. And like they're going to remember it way more than me being in front of the stage talking for 20 minutes. So I'm just really excited to dive into those relationships, continue to develop those relationships, and really just pinpoint those key students along with my adult volunteers that are really ready for just those hard conversations, those deep conversations, that next step in their walk with Jesus. Also encouraging and inviting students into the mission of the church, which is just because they're 15 and showing up to youth group, if they have a relationship with the Lord, they're a disciple, and Jesus calls his disciples to be disciple makers, which means we're not just inviting kids to come to youth group on Saturday night, but we're also sending them back out into their schools, into their workplaces, into their families, and saying, you have the gospel, you are fully equipped to tell people about Jesus.
Yeah. When you think about transitions and you think about coming into a new role, there's like 2 possibilities. You come in and something's really strong and going well. You come in and something is just terrible and dying. And there's like a positive in some ways to step into both of those. If it's horrible, it's like, well, they'll be happy to see me. And if it's really strong, it's like, oh man, I got big shoes to fill. And you're stepping into a ministry that's gone really well. Has it felt daunting for you to step? How's that felt for you?
Yeah, it's definitely felt interesting. I'm a very loud, excited, passionate person. So the ideas I have, I really want to like, let's hit the ground running, let's just do it. And interesting enough, the church I stepped in before, the youth ministry had just gone through a lot of struggles. So when I came in with those ideas, it was very much a reception of like, you're doing anything? Let's go. That's awesome.
Yes.
And coming here, I have been wrestling the tension of, I have a lot of ideas and I'm having to temper myself a little bit. And the Lord's definitely helping me in that of twofold. One, not getting rid of something just because I see it differently, because there's really healthy things that even if I function stronger in a slightly different way, there's no reason to change it because it's very helpful. But also recognizing that I am still me and that there is value to playing to my own strengths. And if I try to be something I'm not by holding programming or even slightly some culture pieces that don't resonate with me, I will ultimately be the reason that those things fall apart. That's actually really strong language. Maybe
No,
not
but
fully,
I understand.
but
I understand what you're saying.
I'll have a role to
Yes,
play in
absolutely.
in
Well, you'll definitely
making it less effective.
you'll definitely have a role to play to keep it going.
Absolutely.
So if it takes the life out of you to keep something going, that's not healthy.
Absolutely.
That's not healthy for anybody. So I appreciate that. That's good. So this next question may seem a little bit odd. We're a family equipping church, which means we believe parents are that primary disciple maker for their child. And over the years, as I've had this conversation with the youth pastors, it's always been, I won't say tension, that's a strong word, but there's always been this like, so where do I fit exactly in this? Because part of what we're saying to you guys is, hey, you're coming alongside these parents, and yes, you are absolutely discipling these students, but we're also saying we want you to see them through the lens of their parents. If their parents are active, they're that primary disciple maker, and you're coming alongside. One of the lenses that I have always pushed for in our family ministries is that you guys are helping equip our parents. Here you are, newlywed, no kids. Like, how is that? Does that feel daunting? How do you guys handle that Tell me about that lens for you guys.
One thing that I would love for parents to hear is, like, you are the first and best discipler of your child, and we get them for maybe 2 hours a week, but like part of that 2 hours is games and then small group that we're not there for, and so really we have only so much input in their life. There are some students who come whose parents aren't Christian, and so like we try to teach them, how do I grow myself in my faith? How do I read the Bible every day? But then also for those students whose parents are like listening to this podcast, for example, and growing themselves, it's more of like, how can we come alongside you and support you? If you need resources or help, feel free to reach out to us, because we'd love to do that.
It can be simple as some of the stuff you already mentioned, language. Like,
Yes.
why are they talking about these things? You know, like, I feel like that's a place certainly that they can come and just say, hey, I'd love to just,
Yeah.
And so church family, I would encourage you, like, take these guys to lunch, go pick their brain a little. If you're out there thinking, yeah, man, my teenager's driving me crazy, I don't know what I can do differently, what kind of conversations to have. Any thoughts, Brendan?
Yeah, to no one's in specific's fault, there's a slight misconception around youth ministry that being the pastor of high school discipleship, being the pastor of middle school discipleship means that the people that we pastor are students, when ultimately we pastor students, our adult volunteers, and parents. And all of those different people fall under our purview of pastorship. And I think sometimes people are quick to go, oh, you just pastor the 12-year-old, like the 11 through 13-year-olds. You just pastor the 14 through 18-year-olds. It's like, well, no. Our ultimate goal is there's so many of them that we're not even actually getting the one-on-one time with them that we could, who is the adult leaders and the parents. So I would argue primary pastorship falls to equipping our adult volunteers and equipping our parents to understand how do you have good conversations with your students? How do you have like Bible-minded conversations with your students? How do you have hard conversations with your students? And I think to your point, David, like, call us, take us out to lunch, ask us your questions, and have confidence that we'll be able to answer for two reasons. One, we love students, so if there's something that we're unsure about, we'll go digging and help find what that answer is with you. Two, and hear this kindly, church, it's not necessarily that we're going to give you all these parenting tips, but we also just want to walk alongside you when you're having a hard moment with your student. Whether that is you and your student can't seem to stop arguing, or your student makes a poor life decision that needs a higher level of intervention, we're not just here to tell you what you did wrong and how to improve it. We're there to cry with you, to be there with you, to bring a meal to you, to go and do a hard meeting with your student, whatever it is. Like, that is truly where our role is. And that's one of the ways we want to be a parent equipping church and make you the first and best disciplers, is by being those spaces in your life as well. And also, if it did come to, like, you have a question about how do I have this hard conversation with my student, we ourselves aren't parents yet, but we are mentored and have relationships with a lot of healthy, strong, faithful parents that we can ask the question. For example, David Pritchard. Hey, David, what would you do if you had to ask your kid this? And, you know, maybe if you bring that to us, we can go to him and then we'll have the conversation together with you. So there's just a couple pieces, votes of confidence of why I think we can handle it, but also our vision behind it.
Yeah. We often use the illustration, taking your shirts to the dry cleaner. You take them there dirty and you hand them off and you say, okay, hey, I'll be back after they're clean, pressed, and ready to go. And sometimes we can have the wrong view that that's youth ministry. Like, hey, I'm bringing you my kid. When I come back, make sure he's clean and, you know, pressed and everything's good. And it's not that. It's a partnership. It's walking side by side. But I love what you said. And church family, please, I hope you heard that. Like, they're pastors, not just of these kids. Like, they're your pastors as well. I put myself in the same boat. I may have years on them and some experience that they don't have in some areas, but I also know, like, they can be helpful to me and they can be pastoral with me and with you. So please lean on these guys. Last question. Right now, in our cultural moment we're in, it's easy to kind of be cynical about where everything is, where our youth are, you know, because we see unfortunately, the way the 24-hour news cycle works, the way social media works, too often we see the worst of what's happening, and so we can become cynical. Are you guys cynical about our students? What word of hope would you give to maybe somebody who's listening to this and they're going, students, I don't know, they get under my skin. What would you guys say to that?
Yeah, I think, and this is usually the result of any time I think about things that are hard or how to handle them, is really just, if you feel yourself getting cynical, I've been in times where I'm like, man, why are my students just not getting it? Why are they not on board with it? And I'm always reminded to pray, because prayer truly is the admission that you are insufficient and you are going to the only one who is sufficient to accomplish whatever needs to be done. We are powerless and God is powerful. So when we look at the news, when we look at relationships with our own students that we know personally, when we look at hard things happening, it's going. And I think when you feel that moment where your heart starts to turn a little hard and go, they're hopeless, they're lost, they don't listen to anything I have to say. Well, who can change that? Who can make them listen? Who can bring transformation? It's God. And when you realize ultimately, oh, I can't actually do anything to change them. I feel that all the time. And I'm a youth pastor and I'm supposed to be up there teaching and preaching and doing all that stuff. And I'm like, okay, none of this matters, because if I try to do it on my own, nothing's going to change.
Yep.
But through my preparation in the night of, and even in the moment of being up there preaching the word, if I just pray, like, Lord, you're the one who does it, because I'm powerless and you're powerful, that's when we see the change. So I'd say, like, when you see the state of the world, when you see the state of teenagers and students today, and even when you truly struggle with those thoughts of they're lost, they're hopeless, they're not going to listen, pray to the one who can make that change.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is very true, and I love that. Just like starting with prayer and knowing that we can't, like, I'm not going to do anything outside of what the Lord does in his plan is so true. But then even statistics recently are showing that, like, maybe the next generation is going back to church because it's authentic and there's, like, revival happening in the next generation, which is really encouraging. I think it's important to maintain this mindset of youth are going to be youth, and sometimes I get mad at middle school boys when they're doing dumb things, but at the same time, like, these are the next generation of church leaders that we get to pour into. Even now they're leading. Like, there's a high school leadership team, there's a middle school leadership team. And
Yeah, and I think that's the thing. I see all the same things that everybody sees, and I see our youth going to Malawi and making an impact. I see our youth going to Malibu and working their rears off for a week just so that the gospel can get proclaimed. I hear you talk about 6 middle schoolers that are willing to go deep. I think there's probably somebody listening that's going, I don't think there are 6 middle schoolers in the whole world that want to go deep. But we know that's not true because we're seeing that in your guys' ministry. And so I just want to say to you two, keep up the good work. You guys, because you're right, that is the next generation, not even the next, it is the now generation. And so, you know, having you guys pouring into them, I so appreciate it. And thanks for joining me, and we will, church family, let's make sure we keep praying for these two and praying for our middle schoolers and high schoolers. But thanks so much for joining me. And thanks everyone for coming, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you for joining us for connection, community, and relationship here on LC3 Family Talk. See you next time.